Meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 25 of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, December 11th, the committee is resuming its study of improving via rail security and customer service. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of our witnesses and, of course, our members. First, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Colleagues, I'd like to now welcome our witnesses for the first panel today. Nous avons une coalition pour le retour des services dans un train de passagers en Gaspésie.
We have a coalition for the return of services by passenger.
Blackwell, Vice President, Mechanical Operations and Asset Management. Welcome. Marie-Flore Ducrot, c'est ça? Parfait. Bienvenue, Vice-Présidente, Customer Experience and
Is that right?
Vice-Présidente.
Chief Legal Risk and Safety Officer. Welcome. Thank you for taking time here for us today. We're going to proceed with our opening remarks. Et on va commencer avec vous, Madame Saint-Ange. La parole est à vous. Vous avez 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
We'll start with you, Madame Saint-Ange. You have the floor. You have 5 minutes. Mr. Chair and ladies and gentlemen, the passenger train in Gaspé is a lifeline. Since 1902, the passenger train connecting Gaspé to the rest of Canada has been an essential form of public transport for the region and enjoys a reputation both in Canada and abroad. Beginning in the 1980s, service deteriorated steadily and was finally discontinued in 2013. The Coalition is asking this committee and the Minister of Transport to take action to end the lack of consideration that travellers have experienced since the 1980s. The Coalition has some potential solutions that could improve services in Eastern Canada. The decline started in 1982. Despite 80,500 passengers in 1985, 7 stations closed without consideration for their social role. For example, the Maria station closed, even though it served the only hospital in Baie des Chaleurs. Closures followed in 1986, 2000, and in 2013, leaving only 5 train stations. In 1980, VIA reduced its service from 7 round trips a week to 3 per week. Ridership dropped by half to 42,000. February 2009 was a disastrous month, with only 5 out of 12 trips reaching Gaspé. The others had to turn around in New Carline, which is 175 kilometres from the terminus. On the 23rd, 56 kilometres from Montreal, Gaspésians had to give up all their carriages to the ocean train and travel 862 kilometres by bus. In 2013, the Chaleur, that train to Gaspésie, had fewer sleeping cars, no restaurant car, no panoramic car, despite the fact that it carried around 28,000 passengers in 2011. Passengers felt humiliated and very poorly treated. On December 10th, 2011, services were suspended from New Carlisle to Gaspé because of problems with a bridge. On December 23rd, upon receiving the report on the condition of the structures, VIA requested another report and suspended service from Matapédia. Partial service resumed after 5 months. In August 2013, service ceased east of Matapédia due to problems at level crossings. Upon arrival in Matapédia, the Chaleur was placed on the siding and passengers had to retrieve their luggage and walk along the tracks to the train station. They were left to fend for themselves and felt disrespected. On August 23rd, VIA stated that the service would resume between Matapédia and New Carlisle as soon as it was assured that the trains were safe again. With each report provided, VIA requested another, even if the results were conclusive in terms of safety. The requirements seemed to be higher for the Gaspé Peninsula than anywhere else in Canada. The Quebec government proposed a plan to repair the tracks to New Carlisle, and VIA committed to returning as soon as the work was completed. In 2017, despite its commitments, VIA refused to gradually resume service because of a lack of resources. In Eastern Canada, the Gaspé train no longer runs. In the Lower St. Lawrence, it runs in the middle of the night and frequently arrives late in Halifax. In 2025, all elected officials in the Gaspé Peninsula supported the gradual return. In January, a Freedom of Information request to VIA revealed that in 2024, at least 2,643 passengers were Gaspésians who traveled hundreds of kilometers to reach a station. A health report showed that in 2024, more than 10,000 people had to travel outside the region to receive specialized health care. The train was the preferred mode of transport for these journeys. After an investment of $355 million, the tracks were ready as far as Port Daniel Gascon. At the 2025 annual meeting, several questions were asked about the progressive return to the Gaspé Peninsula. The president then replied that it was a logistical problem and that he did not want to or could not backtrack on the train. There was a petition from the House of Commons which gathered 3,437 signatures from people in 9 provinces of Canada and 46 from outside Canada. For 40 years, travelers in the Gaspé Peninsula have been campaigning for decent rail service. Despite significant mobilization, there was no commitment to a gradual return, even though VIA offered it to New Carlisle in 2012 and 2013. On January 7th, 2026, the freight train ran from the first time since 2011 to Port Daniel Gascon. But where is the passenger train? The Gaspé Peninsula needs a passenger train that meets regional needs. We want a Montreal to Port Daniel Gascon route now and a Montreal-Gaspé route as soon as possible. A daily, daytime train with few stops between Montreal and Rivière-du-Loup, which serves the Lower St. Lawrence and Gaspésie and allows the ocean train to make fewer stops in municipalities it passes through in the middle of the night. If VIA, for logistical reasons, cannot offer the service, we want a protected budget and a pilot project starting this spring because our society can manage the project. Thank you. Now we have Mr. Paquette. You have 5 minutes.
For welcoming us here today. I've been asked to step into the interim CEO at VIA Rail at a moment when trust in passenger rail is being tested. My mandate is clear: improve the performance of our trains, provide a service people can count on, and maintain trust. I'm here to be transparent on progress and accountable for results. That means trains leaving on time, equipment that performs to expectations, and respectful care for passengers, including when things do not go as planned. I'm joined today by Marie-Flore Ducrot, Vice President, Customer Experience, Railway Network Operations, by Graham Blackwell, Vice President, Mechanical Operations, and by Denis Lavoie, Chief Legal Officer. Together, we are here to speak plainly about what happened on December 10th, what we are doing to prevent similar incidents, and how we will continue to earn the trust of our clients. Pour être clair, ce qui s'est produit le 10 décembre.
To be clear, what happened on December 10th is unacceptable. The passengers who were affected deserve a sincere apology, and I want to express that to them once again. I know that this committee has heard similar statements from my predecessors. I understand that trust is really being tested today. We always learn lessons every time an incident occurs, and we strengthen our emergency response net framework. But the incident involving Train 669 shows us that that is not enough. We must do more than simply improving our processes. We need to deliver better results now.
Service is dependable is my number one priority, and the top priority of our entire leadership team. VIA Rail operates in a complex environment, and some constraints are outside of our direct control. But where we do have control, we must raise the bar, and we will. Following the December incident, expectations on fleet reliability have been expressed very clearly with our supplier, Siemens. Short-term measures are in place to address immediate issues, and we're working together to develop long-term improvements. Avant de répondre à vos questions, je veux rappeler notre...
Answering your questions, I want to remind you of our public service mandate. VIA Rail serves communities from coast to coast, both major centres and remote regions. Gaspésie is an important example of this. Our intention to return there has never changed, and we are open to planning a partial return, but several conditions still need to be met in order to achieve this, and that's why I will be visiting the region very soon to engage directly with the concerned communities.
The December 10th incident in context without minimizing it in any way. In the Quebec City, Windsor corridor alone, VRL runs over 19,000 departures a year, and most trips unfold without incident. What happened on December 10 demands full accountability. My commitment is the following. We'll track our progress using clear performance indicators. We'll have more open dialogue with the communities we serve, and we'll be transparent with Canadians about where we are making progress and where we are falling short. Our duty now is simple. Deliver a service people can count on and prove through action that we deserve the trust of our clients. Thank you for your attention. On est maintenant prêt à répondre à vos questions.
And I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Paquette.
Mr. Lawrence, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll start with on a positive note. VIA has responded every time we've invited you and every time the CEO has come. And so we do appreciate that as a committee. The rest of my questions won't be as easy. We have seen, like, it's like Groundhog Day, right? So in my riding in Cobourg, we had people stuck for, I believe it was 48 hours on a train or so. We've had incidents in Quebec and Ontario where we've had people stranded, people without access to washrooms, people without other than a couple bits of trail mix to eat for hours on end. This is a very serious issue. I appreciate you coming here and taking accountability and responsibility, but you'll excuse my skepticism if I don't, if I see these issues. You're right. There are certain things that are not controllable, but you should be able to control certain things. One of them is the government gave you over $1 billion to get new trains. These trains you got from Siemens. The industry standard is to have 90% fleet availability. And my understanding from reports is that you have 50% availability. What went wrong with the procurement, and how are you going to fix it?
Thank you for your question. So fleet reliability is not yet where we want it to be. And as I mentioned, we have reset expectations clearly. En route reliability of the venture fleet is at 98%. Our focus now is on the 2 remaining percent. And I will ask my colleague, Mr. Blackwell, to give you more details on what we do, working with Siemens.
Just waiting for my light. Okay, so availability, reliability, and safety of our assets is the mission of mechanical operations. Siemens, like any one of our providers, is an important support to that availability and reliability. Since the December 10th incident, we've focused with them engineering solutions, operational mitigations that we immediately put into place, and ongoing software, hardware upgrades that were immediately improving the fleet reliability. It is our focus for all of our fleet, whether it's a legacy car that's 50 years old that's going to Vancouver, or it's the new venture fleet. We're accountable for the reliability of that fleet, and we'll continue to work with Siemens to push them, to pull them along, to make sure we reach that availability, to make sure we have the materials and everything we need to succeed for our clients.
Thank you for that. According to some of the reports, the fleet availability is much lower than what you're stating, but we'll continue on. And according to some reports, or actually a series of reports, the reason why the trains have broken down is because of Canadian cold weather. So it would seem to me that it would be eminently knowable that in Canada, winters are cold, and then you would acquire trains. Was there any winter testing done on these trains before you procured them?
Go ahead with the question. Denis?
Mr. Chair, yes, VRL bought this train from Siemens back in 2018, and yes, before those trains entered into service, we went through a full commissioning period, and winter test was part of that commissioning phase, yes.
So then, is the information not correct that cold weather has played a role in some of these mechanical breakdowns? Is that true?
Reliability in wintertime is not where it should be, and it's not meeting our expectations and the expectations of our passengers. I want to be clear on this. And we know that winter is coming, and winter will be back.
My question then is, with all respect, why was this not caught before these rails were the trains were ever put on the rails and passengers were stranded for hours on end? How come there was not a vetting process? And presumably there'll be more trains that we'll need to buy, that taxpayers will need to pay for. What processes are you going to put in place to make sure that that the trains operate in the Canadian winters?
Thank you for your question. Again, when we purchased that fleet, there were some winter testing done at the time. Now, for me, my mandate is clear, is focusing on what I can control. And right now, we're working closely with Siemens to make sure that our fleet, that the reliability of the fleet is meeting our expectations and the passengers' expectations.
So, could you? Okay, so just this winter, just in a series of a week in February, you had 30 different cancellations of trains. Can you tell us for sure that for next winter we won't have any trucks, we won't have any trains stranded, we won't have any cancellations going forward?
Cancellations are not taken lightly. So the week that you're making reference to, we were expecting a major winter, a weather event. Our responsibility is to make sure that we have guard trains ready in case of a disruption on the network. So we understand that it has an impact on passengers, but it was our responsibility to take that decision because when...
Sorry, just a quick question. Would you undertake to provide our committee with your plan to provide better service or to increase fleet of accessibility for next winter?
I missed the beginning of your question. Could you just repeat the beginning?
Could you provide us with a written document on your plan to increase fleet accessibility during next winter?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence, and merci, Mr. Paquette. Prochainement.
Mr. Paquette. Now we will have Mr. Lauzon. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I will be asking my questions in French today, and I'll start with Ms. Saint-Onge. Thank you for being there from Quebec. I'm very proud of your region that I love. I go there quite often. And you talked to us earlier about the advantages of having a train line in terms of health care. You didn't speak a lot about the economic returns it could represent. I've gone there quite often, and I could say that in the high season, it's hard to find a hotel room. Things are very busy. Do you think that such a train for tourism could fill up even further the services that you offer? Not necessarily, because that did exist before. There were other hotels, other structures. Now it's certain that the fact that the passenger train isn't coming back, it means many people cannot come back to Gaspé, but also a lot of people travel with their families during the holidays and in the summer. So the passenger train, until 2013, was always part of the offer of tourism services. There were a lot of programs, agreements concluded with travel agencies in Montreal who would offer tours to northern Gaspé Peninsula. Lots of things depended on the passenger train, and that stopped. We don't have any taxis, but we could easily have taxis, but now there's not very high demand. Do you think that the return of a passenger train could increase the offer of services, bring in new businesses, new lodging possibilities? We don't need to speak only about what happens there now, but what the potential. And you're also affected by what's happening in the fisheries and by environmental issues in terms of what can be what can be fished, what can be caught. Maybe you could speak about how you could develop the region further. Well, in my document, my document had 15 pages in the middle, and now I pared it down to 2 pages. So I had to choose what I was going to highlight. But we do need the passenger train for the region's economy in all senses of the word. There are people who are coming who could come to work as consultants on the specific projects. Some people leave Gaspé to go work outside of Gaspé. And they're at a disadvantage because they need 2 days of travel to go meet their clients. So the entire economy of Gaspé is affected by passenger train service. And same thing with, we talk about freight transport. That's important. But it's actually people who work in the businesses. There's an example. Last year, the cement factory in Port Daniel Gascon's employees were almost going on strike because they could not find mode of transport to go visit their families. The fact that the train isn't there means that Gaspé is kind of blocked off. You have to have a car. I'm in the Baie des Chaleurs, but for the people from Gaspé, it takes 3 hours to come from the Baie des Chaleurs. So it's huge to go travel to Montreal. All levels of the population in Gaspé needs the train. Mr. Paquette, you expressed a willing desire to go back to Gaspé, and we heard what the limits are. So my question is simple. What concrete conditions that need to be filled in order for the train to return to Gaspé? Mr. Paquette. Thank you for your question. So I have to say that when Via Rail stopped serving that area in 2013, it was not taken lightly. It was always with great regret. And Via Rail always committed to coming back once the track was rebuilt. We learned that the Quebec government decided to not repair that segment past Port Daniel Gascon. So we had to go back to the drawing board. It's a very complex system. The experience of our passengers doesn't start when they go into the train. It ends once they get off the train. So we know that the rail can be rebuilt, have been rebuilt. Now we will go to Gaspé to see what the platforms, the condition of the platforms. Also, the train stations don't belong to us, so we have to conclude agreements for the use of the rails, also for the use of the train stations, because we can't have passengers getting off in the middle of winter. So there are several factors in addition. But now we're back on the drawing board in order to return the service to function. So I saw that in when the rails were closed in 2014, there was a real decrease in terms of the usage of the rails. I think maybe Mr. Paquette would be better positioned to answer this. I think a part of the decrease in the number of passengers was the quality of the infrastructure, and the trips were longer, took more time. Thank you. Madame Saint-Jean, I'm offering you my services to go and visit there and have a better idea and report to the committee. I'll be very happy to do that. Thank you, Mr. Luzon. Now we have Mr. Deschênes. Mr. Deschênes, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me here at the Transport Committee. So thank you, Madame Saint-Onge, for her ardent defense for the return of a passenger train in Gaspé. I have some questions for you, Mr. Paquette. Since January 7th, trains are able now to run between Matapédia and Port Daniel. Will Via Rail reinstate that service between Matapédia and Port Daniel? As I said at the beginning, we have always had the desire to come back to Gaspé, and we're now studying a partial and progressive return to Gaspé. The willingness is there. We have to evaluate, as I said, the entire ecosystem related to passenger service. It goes much farther than simply installing a train. So I'm going to Gaspé. I'm going to meet with people in the communities that are served and the regional governments, municipal committees in the region. So the priority is to reintroduce the service. I have no doubt we'll do it, and we'll do it in an efficient way. Do you have any doubts about re-establishing service between Metapédia and Port Daniel? Well, we have to decide also where we will stop, but we're studying the whole situation. For example, there's New Carlisle, where there's a Y branching in order to be able to have the train turnaround. I'm happy to hear this because what I had perceived of the Via Rail attitude in the past is not the same as what you're presenting, but that's not really important because we're now talking about the future. So what I understand is that you have the intention to reinstate a partial trajectory. So your intention at Via Rail is that service comes back to Port Daniel as soon as possible. So the infrastructure belongs to us. The willingness is there. But we have to make sure that we have to be able to use the railways, the train stations, the platforms with the government of Quebec. And what we want to offer all Via Rail passengers, it's a door-to-door experience. If the train goes to New Carlisle, we want to conclude agreements with regional bus companies, which means that passengers who want to continue to Gaspé and Percé can use those services. So we're talking about New Carlisle. But returning all the way to Port Daniel, is that a part of what you're looking at? Yes, we're looking at all possibilities. But as I've said, there are several factors. So we can remember today that you're saying that you are at the head of Via Rail, and the message you're telling to all the employees is that we're coming back to Gaspé. So what actions will be taken? Because in Gaspé, and I think Madame Saint-Onge said it, it's something that people have been clamoring for a long time. So I think what you're saying today will be very positively received, but there might be a bit of suspicion. How can we reassure the Gaspé people that you will take action so that this service will be reinstated? Well, first of all, let me emphasize the fact that we're hearing the voices in Gaspé, and I think that was one of the most beautiful trips in Gaspé. So I will be meeting the people in the region when we have to have a constant dialogue with the coalition, with people here, to keep them up to date to the progress we're achieving. So within Via Rail, there are people who are looking at various possibilities. So, for example, the rolling stock. Is there rolling stock in Via Rail which would allow you to resume service in a partial way? The answer is yes. Would it be the same service we offered before? I can't confirm, but well, what are the different options you're considering in terms of resuming service? As I've said, we're at the drawing board. We're looking at various elements before we can have a service between Metapédia and Gaspé. That was the CN service. Will it be the same service? It's an option. Can it be a daily service between Quebec City and the Gaspé region? There are various possibilities. Another option could be a daytime train going from Port Daniel or New Carlisle to Quebec. Is that part of the plans? Yes, that could be a possibility. But we only own about 3% of the infrastructure. So we have to conclude an agreement with the owners of the infrastructure in order to be able to run it. So you'll be welcome in Gaspé when you come back. So you want to go look at the condition of the railway stations. I'm saying that passenger rail is a very complex system, more than you'd think. And for us, the safety of the passengers just doesn't start when they board the train and when they leave it. We talked about winter conditions. We can't leave people on a station platform in winter conditions and extreme conditions. Yes, I understand. I'm not asking you for any dates, Mr. Paquette, but what's the timeline that we could hope for to have the first Via Rail train in Gaspé? I can't give you an answer, really. We're at the drawing board. Thank you, Mr. Paquette and Mr. Deschênes.
The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to express and raise some of my concerns here today. Merci les témoins.
Thank you to the witnesses.
Communities in Northern Ontario that rely on passenger rail to access essential services, including specialized care at Health Sciences North in Sudbury. Via Rail is a federally owned Crown corporation funded by Canadian taxpayers. Its mandate is to provide reliable passenger rail service to rural and remote communities. Would we agree that Sudbury White River Line is representative of such communities?
Thank you for your question. So, absolutely. I had the opportunity in my previous life to spend a lot of time in your region, in Sudbury. I was in the mining industry for 15 years. I want to be clear. Our mandate is to focus on what we can control and improve our services. We got to make sure that our trains are leaving stations on time, that the fleet reliability is where it should be, and that people get to their destination without incident. And when there's an incident or things are not going as planned, our focus should be on passenger care and well-being.
Okay, I'm glad we've established that it's an essential service for us in the north, and I'm glad to hear your willingness to improve performance, reliability, and customer service. Now I'm going to talk about this specific line 185, 186, and it's a great opportunity for you to do just that very easily. And a service and customer service reliability, it always comes down to money a lot of the time. So how is this line funded?
Well, we receive public funding, right? Via Rail is an essential service. You touch it, and it remains for many Canadians the only option when it comes to transportation mode.
Okay, so we established that this line from Sudbury to White River is a remote access, and we should fund it. Now, I have got something here that says, sorry, the Sudbury White River train does not receive direct funding from the Federal Remote Passenger Rail Program. So I'm asking why is that? Because that program just received $63 million for the next 3 years. And we have a big reliability issue with the Bud car leaving Sudbury to White River.
Ask my colleague Denis Lavoie to answer this question.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know if it's going to answer your specific question, but today Via Rail is going through two major procurement processes to renew the fleet that we have across the country outside of the Quebec-Windsor corridor. And Sudbury White River is part of that procurement process. So as we speak, we are renewing what we call the LDR fleet, long distance, regional, and remote, and there will be brand new trains for that specific segment of Sudbury White River.
Do we know when that is coming?
Look, we're in the midst of the procurement processes. We will award the contract in the coming months, and then the design and manufacturing of those trains will start, and it will take a couple of years.
I fear that a couple of years, the train that we have in Sudbury now is not going to last that long. It breaks down often. The train is to run from, I believe, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from Sudbury to White River. And the other days, it comes back to Sudbury the next day. Monday is idle, but last January, February, the train was shut down for almost a month. And if we call it an essential service and there's no backup plan, there's no other service available. Just to compare that I want to be the voice for the North, and it's very important, it seemed that there's a two-tier system of service. Because if we go back to your incident in Brockville in December, when you had that incident, you had an apology, you had made plans for people to get to their destination, and so on. So when the train is canceled, the White River train is canceled, this is what the people get, and I quote.
Mr. Belanger, I am going to have to ask you to ask a question. You're over time, but I want to get you to ask your question before I provide the floor to another member.
Okay. Am I out of time?
Yes, sir. But you can ask a question. I was giving you an opportunity
Do we
to ask
have
a
a
question.
plan? Okay, I'll forget that. I used to be in the transportation business. I had to provide a service from point A to point B. If I could provide that service, I had a backup plan. We don't in Sudbury. What are we going to do about that?
Ask him to present a plan to our committee.
Are you going to be able to present a plan for the Sudbury White River that will be reliable and consistent?
We will present a plan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belanger, and thank you very much, Mr. Paquette. Next, we'll go to Ms. Wien. Ms. Wien, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci à les témoins pour être
Thank you
ici
to the
aujourd'hui.
witnesses for being here today. I'm sorry, I will be asking my questions in English.
Via rail. I used to ride the train all the time between Toronto and Montreal when I had to commute for McGill University. But I will say that for many years, it's just felt like maybe we didn't always arrive on the time that we were hoping for. The trains are romantic and they're wonderful and they're part of our very important infrastructure corridor. But we've had some incidents now over the last few years that have really give Canadians some pause about how we're doing on our rail service. And I would love for you to tell me a little bit about the steps that have been taken over the last few years, especially given all of these challenges, particularly around communications, around compensation for passengers, and ensuring that that we're trying to do our best to manage these situations going forward.
So thank you for your question. So I can assure you that we have learned from each incident that we had, right? And we have reviewed our internal protocols, and we'll ask ma collègue, Marie-France Ducrot, de vous donner plus de détails sur les actions que nous avons prises.
Merci, Mathieu.
Thank you, Matthew. So, over the past few years, after all the incidents we experienced, we've constantly been learning from these events, and it has brought us to completely redo our emergency protocols and our escalation plan. So we have alerts with more detailed escalation factors to ensure that situations be addressed adequately and in good time. And we've also revamped our system of communications for our passengers and for our frontline employees so that they can be well equipped to answer the questions to ensure that people get the information they need in order to make decisions.
Practice or policy if an incident happens around compensation or recognition, getting another VIA credit when you are reluctant to get back on the train may not feel like the right way to be have that rectified. But I'm curious to see what is now in place for customers who experience deep delays or concerns and challenges.
To give you more details.
Donc, effectivement, notre politique de compensation en
Yes,
cas de
our compensation policy with the operational disturbances is one of credits for future travel on VIA. We hope that our passengers can give us a second chance and have a more pleasant experience. That being said, in major cases such as the incident in December 2025, we realize that the situation is not acceptable for the passengers passengers who experienced this got a complete refund for their trip as well as a complete credit for the next trip.
Process for ensuring that frontline staff now are better trained around how to respond in emergency situations where the work has been happening on that front.
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. So we have completely revised our way of communicating. We've decided to use various channels of communication in a more optimal way, the channels that we have that are available to us, and make sure that everyone shares the same communication channels so that everyone can get the same information at the same time and that it can be done in a timely fashion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wien. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
Now we
la
have
parole.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I think that it was agreed that we would take up our discussion on the motion of the previous our previous meeting. So I would like to remind you that the motion dealt with that the Port of Montreal make available to the public and give the committee under 108 of the regulations its plan for rehabilitation of contaminated lands in Contrecoeur and engage itself to respect the municipal and Quebec rules on environment. Since I submitted that to the committee, we discussed around the table to see how this could be amended or how it would be acceptable for the entire committee. So I think there's someone on the government side, as far as I understand, who has an amendment to propose. That would be the object of consensus. So I will give Mr. Callaway the floor.
A friendly amendment, and I'll read it. That on behalf of the committee, the clerk sent a letter to the Port of Montreal requesting that it make it available to the public and submit to the committee within 30 days its remediation plan for contaminated lands in Contrecoeur, and that the committee invite the port to comply with the municipal regulations and Quebec environmental laws. So that would be our amendment put forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Callaway. Est-ce que ça vous va, Mr. Barcelou-Duval?
C'est parfait
Is
pour
that
moi.
acceptable for you, Mr. Barcelou-Duval? Yes, it is. Thank you very much for the people on the other side of the table for the collaboration. I hope it'll be that way, the same for all the issues that we face.
Amendment proposed by Mr. Callaway. So we'll go to a vote on the amendment first and then the revised motion. Sure. Yes, Mr. Albus.
Usually we would be sent out the amendment, so I'd like you to do that first, please.
Would you like me to suspend, sir?
Yeah, well...
No, I can. It's not a problem, Mr. Albus.
No, can we not just vote on this at the end? We still have witnesses here.
Well, we're discussing it now. We'll dispense of this first. We'll make sure, Mr. Callaway, if you can get that distributed to the clerk so that the clerk can distribute it to members. I will suspend for a couple minutes, colleagues, to ensure that we can get that to the clerk and distribute it to members. The meeting is suspended to the call of the chair. I call this meeting back to order. So now that the motion and the amendment have been distributed to all members, I believe we can go to a vote on the amendment first. All those in favor of the amendment proposed by Mr. Kellaway? All those opposed? Amendment adopted. All those in favor of the motion as amended? All those opposed? Motion as amended is adopted. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Barcelou-Duval. Thank you, colleagues. Là, vous avez la parole, Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
Oui, merci,
You have
Monsieur
the
le
floor,
Président.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll try and make the best use possible of our time today. So far in the evidence we heard, we have heard what we knew already in terms of the Via Rail project, the new Quebec-Windsor corridor, the trains that were bought for that corridor break down very often, almost whenever it's cold in winter. But the worst is that in 2018, for the fleet renewal, the 32 trains in that corridor, the Liberals chose to buy equipment from a company in California rather than something that would have been built here in Quebec. I think a train that would have been built here would have been able to work in winter because in Quebec we live anywhere. So I also want to say in an article by Julien Arsenault in January, Via Rail doesn't seem to have learned from its errors because despite the nice words about buying Canadian, the Liberals intend to do the same thing a second time, to potentially let this contract go to a company abroad, especially while we're in a situation of tariff war. So I want to file this motion that this standing committee ask the Ministry of Transport to ensure that Via Rail will get its equipment from Canadian companies in conformity with the Buy Canadian policy in order to favor the jobs and employment. So thank you very much, Mr. Barcelou. What I'll do is I will suspend the meeting in order to give time to distribute.
Motion, est-ce que c'est dans les deux langues officielles, Monsieur Barcelou-Duval?
Ça va vous être envoyé
It will be in both official languages. Yes, I'll send it to you very, very soon in both languages.
I call this meeting
Thank you,
back.
Chair.
Thing that we'll do is just ensure that we're not taking up the time of our witnesses. On behalf of all members of the committee, I want to thank you for your time today, and thank you for contributing to this very important study. If it's okay with members, I'll ask the members to excuse themselves. Seeing no objection, thank you for being here. Oh, sorry. Our witnesses, thank you for being here. The members truly want to leave. So thank you very much. You can be excused. We'll deal with some business here before we turn it over to our next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, witnesses. I'm sorry the last bit of the meeting got derailed.
Thank you
there.
very much.
Donc, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lauzon. Je vais passer la parole à
Very
vous.
much, Mr. Lauzon. I give you the floor. Thank you, Chair. Well, so yes, we agree with the intention because it is the federal policy for procurement. But procurement, then we feel it's an obligation to do procure this way. So I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion. Just after Via Rail, before, rather than procure from manufacturers established in Canada, we could say that they apply the federal Buy Canadian policy in order to support the maintenance and development of domestic jobs and industrial capacity. So thank you, Mr. Lauzon. Mr. Bersailloux-Duval, what do you think of this? Well, I think we should add the idea of the, in the context of the fleet renewal. So what's proposed by Mr. Lauzon currently would not include that. So I understand he's proposing that the Standing Committee on Transport and Infrastructure and Communities ask the Department of Transport to ensure that Via Rail apply the federal Buy Canadian policy. And then I would say in the context of the renewal of the fleet for the long corridor in order to support the maintenance and development of domestic jobs and industrial capacity. Mr. Chair? So we could take Mr. Bersailloux-Duval's, but I'll take his words if the clerk has noted what Mr. Bersailloux-Duval had said. Thank you, Mr. Lauzon. I just want to make sure that you received it. Could you repeat what you said, Mr. Bersailloux-Duval? So I'll repeat Mr. Lauzon's amendment that the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities requests that the Department of Transport ensure that Via Rail applies the federal Buy Canadian policy in the context of the renewal of its fleet in the long corridor in order to support the maintenance and development of domestic jobs and industrial capacity. I agree with that, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lauzon.
Appuie cet petit changement.
The Conservatives apply this amendment and want to congratulate Mr. Bersailloux-Duval.
An amendment proposed by Mr. Lauzon. We'll vote on that first. It looks like we do have consent for this. All those in favor of the amendment proposed by Mr. Lauzon? All those opposed? Adopted unanimously. Now we will go to the motion as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion as amended passes. Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm going to suspend now to allow for the clerk to transfer over to our second round of witnesses for today. The meeting is suspended to the call of the chair. Call this meeting back to order. Colleagues, before we begin the questioning of our second round of witnesses for today, I believe we have some housekeeping that we need to take care of. First of which would be the adoption of the budget for the port study, which has been distributed to members. All those in favor of adopting the budget? All those opposed? Adopted. Next, I believe we have a motion that was proposed by Mr. Lawrence. I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
I believe we have agreement to the motion with an amendment coming from the Liberals. So I'll just read the motion really quickly, and then they can read their amendment, and we'll vote, and we'll get this done. That the Minister of the Transport, along with officials from the department, be invited to appear on the supplementary estimate sub C 2025-2006 for 2 hours, and this meeting take place at least 5 calendar days before the supplementary estimates are to be reported to the House. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks very much. And our friendly amendment would be that after that this meeting takes place, we would add within a reasonable time frame, rather. So we would strike at least 5 calendar days before the supplementary estimates are to be reported to the House.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kellaway. Yes, Mr. Albus.
I just wanted to indicate that we really are wanting to see the minister, so we really do hope that he takes the opportunity to be accountable.
So noted. Thank you very much, Mr. Albus. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment proposed by Mr. Kellaway? All those opposed? So adopted. All those in favor of the motion as amended? So adopted. Thank you very much, colleagues. So, colleagues, I now have the pleasure of introducing our next round of witnesses, beginning with our representative from the Cruise Lines International Association, Mr. Barry Penner, advisor. Welcome to you, sir. And we also have from the St. John Port Authority, Mr. Craig Bell Estabrooks, Chief Executive Officer, joining us by video conference. Welcome to you. And we also have, and I'm going to make sure that I get this in, from Corner Brook Port Corporation, Ms. Kelly Smith, Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to you as well. We'll begin with our line of our opening remarks, and for that I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Smith. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the Port of Corner Brook operates on the traditional territory of the Beothuk and that the island of Newfoundland is the ancestral homeland of the Mi'kmaq. The Port of Corner Brook is a not-for-profit, community-based port serving Western Newfoundland and Labrador. We are not a Canada Port Authority. When the federal government divested of our port in 2004, we became fully responsible for operating and maintaining federal-built infrastructure without the borrowing capacity or revenue streams available to CPAs. Across Canada, independent ports like ours play a critical role in regional and national supply chain resilience. In Atlantic Canada alone, we handle roughly 40% of all domestic and international marine trade. Our ports move the people and goods that fuel the Canadian economy. Critical minerals, forest products, seafood, and energy, while sustaining rural and coastal communities. In Western Newfoundland, emerging opportunities in critical minerals, including inputs for clean energy technologies, highlight the importance of reliable marine infrastructure to move equipment, supplies, and future critical mineral products to market. The Port of Corner Brook already contributes to Canada's trade network through our international container service and global exports in partnership with Kruger-owned Corner Brook Pulp and Paper. With upgraded infrastructure, we can further diversify and continue to strengthen Canada's global competitiveness. Independent ports also play a critical role in national security and Arctic operations. We provide staging points for the Canadian Coast Guard and Royal Canadian Navy, supporting vessel patrols, resupply missions, and emergency response. Our ports underpin regional resilience, ensuring essential goods reach communities during extreme weather or supply disruptions, supporting food security. Like many ports across the country, however, we are managing aging core infrastructure well beyond its intended useful life. To illustrate the scale of this challenge for independent ports, we recently issued an RFP for repairs to just 65 piles. The final cost for those repairs was $5.2 million. Our port has approximately 1,500 piles, the majority of which will require repair or replacement within the next decade. For a not-for-profit port without CPA-level borrowing authority or the revenue levers, the costs are not recoverable. Yet the infrastructure is essential to industries and communities we serve. Deterioration is accelerating, and without timely intervention, the costs will only continue to increase. To address this, we have undertaken assessments for a potential expansion and modernization initiative, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to secure safe and reliable marine infrastructure for Western Newfoundland and, by extension, Canada's supply chains. The project includes rehabilitating aging assets, adding a new berth and laydown capacity, and improving climate resilience. This will increase our ability to support additional container traffic, renewable energy projects, and critical mineral supply chains. Initial estimates exceed well beyond $100 million, however, an investment that would deliver benefits far beyond our region. Many existing federal programs, whether due to cost share expectations or repayable loan structures, implicitly assume CPA-level resources. This unintentionally limits the ability of independent ports to access the very programs intended to support national supply chains. We believe federal partnership tailored to the realities of independent ports is essential to address long-standing infrastructure deficits, ensure regional supply chain reliability and food security, support rural and coastal economic development, and strengthen Canada's national transportation network. The Port of Corner Brook is ready to modernize, ready to grow, and ready to support Canada's evolving trade and security needs. But to unlock that potential, independent ports require federal partnerships that reflect the realities of divested infrastructure. With the right partnerships, ports like ours can strengthen supply chains, support emerging industries, and provide the capacity Canada will need in the decades ahead. We respectfully ask that the Government of Canada develop dedicated funding and policy tools that recognize the unique capacities and limitations of divested community-based ports. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I will be pleased to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith, for your opening remarks. Next, we'll have Mr. Penner. Mr. Penner, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Barry Penner, and I'm appearing today on behalf of Cruise Lines International Association, also known by our acronym CLIA, C-L-I-A. CLIA is the world's largest cruise industry association, representing ocean, river, and specialty cruise lines, as well as travel advisors, suppliers, ports, and maritime partners across Canada and across the world. Cruising is an important contributor to Canada's economy. In 2024 alone, 3.7 million cruise guests entered Canada through ports in British Columbia, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada. The sector generated approximately $5.1 billion in economic activity, and that's right across the country, contributing $2.7 billion to Canada's GDP and supporting more than 24,000 Canadian jobs, and generating $1.4 billion in wages and salaries. This represents real economic activity flowing into Canadian communities, from longshore workers and shipyards to tourism operators and local businesses. Our recommendations today focus on ensuring Canada's cruise sector remains competitive, modern, and positioned for sustainable growth. First, let's modernize and expand port infrastructure. Canada has more than a dozen cruise ports that deliver significant economic opportunity. However, as you've heard just moments ago, some infrastructure is aging, and several facilities cannot accommodate newer and larger vessels. At the same time, permitting processes and capital approval processes are delaying necessary upgrades. Cruise ships are becoming more technologically advanced and environmentally efficient. Port infrastructure needs to evolve accordingly. CLIA recommends enhanced federal support for cruise-compatible port infrastructure, streamlined permitting timelines, and targeted investment programs that recognize cruise tourism as an important driver of regional economic development. This is not about expansion for its own sake. It's about ensuring that Canadian ports remain internationally competitive with U.S. and European ports that are actively modernizing. Second, we support marine alternative fuel development. The cruise industry is committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2050, and cruise lines are investing billions of dollars in fuel-flexible engines and emission reduction technologies. However, ships can only transition to new fuels where alternative fuels are available at scale and at a commercially viable cost. Canada has an opportunity to become a leader in the production and supply of low-carbon marine fuels. Federal policies that support production capacity and encourage marine fuel infrastructure while aligning regulatory frameworks with international standards will help make this transition possible. Third, continue to expand shore power infrastructure. Shore power, which is allowing ships to plug into land-based electricity while they're in port, is one of the most effective ways to reduce emissions at berth. By 2028, roughly 80% of the global cruise fleet will be equipped to connect to shore power, and virtually all new ships on order now will have that capability. Canadian ports such as Vancouver, Halifax, and Montreal already have shore power facilities, and I know others are exploring installation. Continued federal investment can help expand shore power availability as part of Canada's Green Corridor initiatives. Fourth, enhance maritime competitiveness. Cruise volumes in Canada rose by about 7% in 2024, and this year is expected to be another growth year. However, maintaining that growth requires an efficient and competitive operating environment. We support expanding the Canada Border Services Agency's virtual clearance pilot, which took place on the East Coast, and making regulatory changes that allow broader adoption across Canada. Ship maintenance and refits represent a growing economic opportunity. In 2024 alone, cruise lines spent about $93 million on Canadian ship-related expenses. But high fees and long processing times, and allowing experts from other countries who are required for sensitive work on technologically advanced systems, due in part to warranty requirements, can create barriers to bringing more of that valuable refit work here to Canada and the jobs that come with it. Further streamlining visa and entry processes for crew members and technical specialists will help support jobs for Canadians. In closing, Canada has a strong cruise sector with growing demand and a highly capable workforce. With strategic infrastructure investment, support for alternative fuels, expanded shore power, and regulatory modernization, Canada can strengthen port competitiveness, support thousands of Canadian jobs, while advancing environmental leadership and securing long-term economic growth for our coastal communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would welcome the committee's questions and be pleased to expand on any of these recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Penner. And finally, we turn it over to Mr. Estabrooks. Mr. Estabrooks, thank you for staying late today. I know it's 7 p.m. out there in St. John. I'll turn the floor over to you for your 5-minute opening remarks, sir.
It's my pleasure to be here no matter what time of day. Merci, Monsieur le Président, et aux membres du
Thank you,
comité.
Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you today.
Opportunity to speak today on behalf of our growing global gateway that serves as an increasing critical conduit for Canada's trade. I would also like to recognize, Mr. Chair, your visit to the Port of St. John last summer, which we greatly appreciated, and which provided an opportunity to see firsthand the role our port plays in strengthening Canada's trade and our national supply chain. Port St. John manages 330 acres of land and adjacent waterways on behalf of the Government of Canada as a Canadian port authority. Handling over 1,000 vessels annually, we support a diverse cargo base from more than 1 million tons of Saskatchewan potash exports to the 24 million tons of liquid bulk that includes imported crude oil, exported refined petroleum, and liquefied natural gas, alongside a wide range of other breakbulk and bulk commodities. We also play an important role in southern New Brunswick's tourism ecosystem, welcoming between 150 and 200,000 cruise passengers via the Bay of Fundy each year. As a key economic driver for New Brunswick, the port contributes an estimated $1.3 billion to provincial GDP and supports more than 6,000 jobs. Perhaps the most exciting story, and the one increasingly putting us on the global stage, is our container sector. Having recently completed a nation-building project of our own, we understand well the benefits of public investment in Canada's supply chain. With the support from programs such as the Build Canada Fund, the Original Trade Diversification Fund, and in partnership with the Government of New Brunswick, we completed the transformational $247 million modernization of our West Side Container Terminal at the end of 2025. This project has quadrupled our container capacity, significantly increased our vessel handling capabilities, and has attracted world-class partners committed to the long term. Today, Port St. John is one of North America's fastest growing ports. Container volumes increased 29% between 2024 and 2025, doubling over the past 5 years and growing by 315% over the past decade. This growth has been driven in large part by the nearly $1 billion in private sector investments in infrastructure and equipment across our growing gateway. Investments from terminal operators, rail lines, and shipping lines were catalyzed by the initial public funding in our container terminal infrastructure. Sometimes when you build it, they really do come. Momentum continues to build. Later this year, we will open the first Canadian import-export hub by Americold, a global leader in cold storage for temperature-controlled goods. This facility will expand value-added services for shippers and support the development of the broader agri-food strategy at Port St. John. To ensure we can reach our full potential and support the federal government's trade diversification agenda, we can't let our foot off the gas. That's why we are aggressively investing in our infrastructure to the tune of $35 million through our annual capital program over the next 5 years. This is not to create a new, but rather to replace and restore aging infrastructure. In alignment with many other ports across this country, our infrastructure deficit remains a major issue. To strengthen the gateway and bolster Canada's supply chain resilience, we must invest strategically and to address these infrastructure deficits while also looking beyond our piers and channels. A holistic approach is required to ensure fluidity across the entire supply chain. This includes targeted investments in railroad and inland infrastructure so that Canadian goods can move seamlessly to and from global markets on each coast. We welcome the federal government's new Trade Diversification Corridors Fund, which reflects this system-wide approach. From a governance and regulatory standpoint, the federal government should maximize our financial flexibility to support those system-wide investments by revisiting the borrowing limits process under the Canada Marine Act. Simplifying and streamlining this process would enable us to strategically invest in our gateway without cash flow constraints. I echo the comments of my port counterparts from coast to coast to coast. Our ports play a critical role in securing Canada's economic sovereignty. Our growing gateway is uniquely positioned to support the federal government's trade diversification goals, and I appreciate the opportunity to share that message with you here today. Thanks for having me. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Estabrook. We'll begin our line of questioning with Ms. Anstey. Floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Kelly, and to all the witnesses and for the great work that you do at the Corner Port. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Kelly, in your opening remarks, you talked about some of the challenges that smaller ports have, and I just want to dig into that a little bit. I think it's important for the work of the committee. You often operate with fewer resources, fewer staff than large port authorities, So when you're applying for these complex federal programs, can you just tell us, does that application process create another barrier for you? And can you just expand on that a little bit, please?
Sure. Yes, it does. We operate with 3 people who would be working on an application, for this type of funding. The application package tends to be the same for us as it would be looking for, $50 million as it would be for somebody looking for, billions of dollars. So the process to do that is takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of knowledge. We have, like I said, 3 people that would be working on it on our part. The CPAs have much larger staffs, obviously, but they also, I know, tend to use outside consultants to prepare those documents, prepare that application package, which would be expensive, and it's not something that we can necessarily do without funding, even to do those application packages externally. So that's a big drawback for us, is that we just don't have the staff internally to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Something else, too, the government's been talking a lot about Bill C-5, large nation-building projects. We saw on that list certainly investment into the Montreal port. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are in being overlooked in that process where you play such a critical role. Is this a concern that you have as a smaller port, that you won't get in on this, part of the government strategy on that?
No. 100%. Bill C-5, while the mandate is great, our project that we're looking at that I spoke of hits on all of the key targets within that, within the National Trade Corridors Diversification Fund. We would our project would fit there perfectly. The issue becomes in the way it's structured. Like I said, the cost sharing aspect of it can be limiting for small ports. For example, again, like I said, we really would like to do this expansion plan and the rehabilitation of our existing berth. We need that. But if the cost is $100 million or up to $200 million, we just don't have the capacity to take on the borrowing for that. We don't have the revenue streams. So it pretty well eliminates us from it. So that's the struggle, is that the expense of doing these are so high, but yet the small independent ports really don't have the revenue stream, like I said, or the ability to borrow $50 million to see this through.
And just to reflect on that a little bit more, you talked about some emerging opportunities, like in critical minerals as an example. So without the modernization of the port infrastructure, which is, your biggest issue right now, is there a risk that you're going to miss out on those opportunities? And if you can just expand on that a little bit.
No, we definitely would miss out. I mean, if we can't, so in Western Newfoundland right now, there's quite a few projects on the go that focus on critical minerals, and we want to be ready for when they're ready to export. If they have to take their product outside of Western Newfoundland, their costs are going to go up, and that's going to impact their project. So from our standpoint, we need the second berth to enable us to be ready for when they're ready. And without that second berth, or even working on our existing infrastructure, because our existing infrastructure is we're struggling with it right now. There's areas where we can't use. So if we have to work with that, we won't be ready for when they're ready, and we will lose out on those opportunities.
Yeah, thank you for that. Also, just with respect to the importance of the Corner Brook Port, you mentioned supporting Coast Guard and naval operations, including missions into the Eastern Arctic. Could you just expand on that a little bit? Because I also think that that's a very important piece in terms of the role that you play in our area.
Yeah, and it's not just our port. I mean, a lot of small independent ports work closely with the Canadian Coast Guard in particular. In the winter months, Port of Corner Brook is a very regular stop for the Canadian Coast Guard. They're there now. Actually, we have 2 icebreakers there because they service the Newfoundland ferry to Labrador. So they frequent our port. Like I said, there's 2 there this week. They're there from December to May. They come in and they obtain fuel. They replenish their supplies. They also do crew changes there. So we are a critical spot for them. There's nowhere else in Western Newfoundland where they can access during those months because we have full year-round service. We also have a deep water port, so they can access our port during those periods. So it's crucial that we be open for those purposes.
And just quickly, because I think I'm running out of time, but if the port doesn't get the necessary resource that you need in order to address these infrastructure issues that you have, what does that mean in terms of the long-term economic viability of your operation?
So I touched on a little bit about Corner Brook Pulp and Paper, for example. They are a huge exporter through our port, and they export all over the world. If we can't, they're also looking at diversifying as well and bringing in other, exporting other products. But one of the things they're looking at is wind energy. If we can't upgrade our facility, if we can't refurbish it to a point where we will ultimately not be able to have a service in the long run. And I'm not talking 10, 15 years, I'm talking 5, 10 years. Like I said earlier, we're already at a point where some of our existing dock has been cordoned off because we cannot, it doesn't have the integrity anymore, and we can't utilize it. So we're very, we're at a critical point where we have to make decisions. Do we spend $5 million annually to
Thank
upgrade?
you very much. Sorry, Ms. Smith,
All
time is
good.
up. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
sharing that. Next, we'll turn it over to Mr. Greaves joining us online. Mr. Greaves, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. Pleasure to join you, as always. And thank you to the witnesses for being with us today as well. My question to begin with is for Mr. Penner. Good afternoon, Mr. Penner. As I'm sure you're aware, my riding of Victoria is home to the busiest cruise ship port in Canada. We welcomed just under 1 million visitors in 2025, and we're always keen to do so. We recognize the value that the cruise industry brings to our region, but at the same time, there are always people people in our community who are looking to see how we can improve the experience for tourists, for residents, and of course also for our local marine ecosystem. This is a vital part of what makes our community special, and so I wondered if you could elaborate on your comments in terms of steps that the industry is taking or perhaps plans to take in future to help reduce its environmental impact on the port communities where you visit or pass through.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you virtually. Look forward to meeting you in person when time permits. As I mentioned in my remarks, the cruise line industry has been investing billions of dollars, literally, in advanced technologies, which then later get adopted by the rest of the shipping industry. Cruise tends to dominate public attention, but it represents less than 1% of ocean-going vessels. But it's really where the research and innovation takes place. We are the pointy edge, or the leading edge of the ship, making advances in technology, and then they get adopted in other sectors in the maritime industry. So over the years, we've greatly reduced the amount of waste that's generated on board. The recycling programs are second to none. There are occasionally challenges due to Made in Canada regulations that we have to deal with, which sometimes limit the amount of recycling we're able to do. But that's an ongoing work in progress, trying to make sure that other objectives don't get in the way of enhanced recycling targets, which our member lines are very proud of their record in terms of just the number of items, the percentage that's recycled, and the waste that's avoided. Virtually all of our ships, especially on the West Coast, have what's known as advanced wastewater treatment systems, far superior to many municipal wastewater treatment plants. I was the Minister of Environment at the time in British Columbia that required Victoria to start treating its sewage. So it struck me as a bit ironic that the cruise ships were performing to a much higher standard than our provincial capital wanted to at the time, because there was some opposition to my order that they had to start treating the sewage. But we've overcome that now, and now Victoria does have advanced wastewater treatment on about a par to what's happening with the cruise ships. But I can't say the same for the city of Vancouver, where there's still primary sewage treatment. So the environmental performance that you see on board cruise ships exceeds, as I mentioned, many of the wastewater treatment systems operated by municipalities in various parts of Canada. Along the way, we've made other efforts in terms of energy reduction, so that less energy is required to operate the ships on a per-passenger basis, and constantly looking for innovations, whether it's LED lighting and more efficient heating and cooling systems on board the ships. And now working through the International Maritime Organization with the 2050 zero-emission target, you're seeing changes in operations of the cruise ships, including slowdowns. So operating at lower speeds overall tends to reduce the amount of fuel consumed over the length of a cruise, whether it's 4 days or 7 days. One of the unintended consequences of that, though, is that the cruise ships sometimes have less time that they can spend in port, because if they're moving slower between ports, they can't spend as much time in the ports. And that's been noticeable in Victoria, and that message has been heard.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for those remarks and for reminding us how far we've come in terms of our own relationship with our local environment here. Could you elaborate on the point that you just raised about recycling, please, and what the barriers are there for some of those recycling measures to be adopted, if I understood you, while the vessels were in Canadian waters?
Yeah, it's obviously due to other competing public priorities around identifying items that are in the ships that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency might have concern about, having been whether they're properly inspected or not, or at least proof of that. So if the CBSA inspectors aren't satisfied that all the food items, for example, Parmesan cheese, has been stamped with an appropriate mark, then items on board the ship can be considered high risk. And this is a real example of what happened last year and the year before. But we were able to, by the end of the season, get around that. But the consequence of when items on board the ship are deemed high risk from a public health perspective, because the appropriate stamp on the cheese is not identified, then the recycling the recycling process doesn't work the same way. The waste has to be taken off, and it can't go to recycling. And the cruise lines would much prefer that wine bottles, pop bottles, cardboard, and so on get recycled rather than not. So that's an ongoing issue that we're working with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency on, as well as Transport Canada.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Shifting gears slightly, in terms of the economic impact of the cruise industry for Canadian ports, we have certain kinds of data related to direct employment and sometimes direct economic benefits of cruise passengers, for example, when they dock in a particular community. But does your organization have more robust data about the indirect economic impacts of cruise on different Canadian port cities? And would that data be publicly available?
A 15-second response, please, sir.
Yes, we do economic impact assessment. I think it's almost every year, or maybe it's every 2 years. I'd have to double check. We're working, I think, on finalizing the most recent results, but they are made public. It's available through our website, and occasionally gets accompanied by a news release.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greaves, and thank you, Mr. Penner. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou-Duval, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
We have Mr. Barcelou-Duval for 6 minutes. Hello and welcome to our witnesses today. My first question is for Mr. Penner about international cruises. I have a question for you. I'm from Quebec, and in Quebec there are several cruise destinations that are very popular. You think about the city of Quebec, and even on the Côte-Nord in Gaspésie, the Île-de-Madeleine, Montreal. But I'd like to know, as far as you know, what are the places in Quebec that haven't yet, that have the greatest growth potential, and where there's a need for investment? Are they the same places?
As I mentioned in my opening remarks, there's now shore power available there for ships to plug in and turn off their engines while they're at port. I hear from our members that there's strong interest in Quebec City. It's a destination that the passengers like to get to. One of the challenges can be arranging transportation from the Port of Montreal to Quebec City. Buses can be sometimes hard to secure, adequate numbers to bring passengers there. I believe that there are some discussions taking place about possibly arranging rail cars as an alternative using the railway system. I believe your previous session you had someone from Via Rail present. That might be something that could happen in the future. I'm not in a position to say, but there are other options that I know the industry is looking at with their partners to try and move passengers to the sites they want to see. And one option might be rail, and therefore reduce some of the traffic on the roads.
Vous mentionnez en fait l'importance en fait de la présence.
You've talked about the importance, well, the presence of shore power in order to meet climate change objectives. Is the presence of the shore power infrastructure an asset that would attract more cruises? And are there places where it's not available and where it could make a difference?
I think the cruise lines look at. Of course, price is also a question, but in Canada we do tend to have very competitive electricity rates. It's not the same in all parts of the world. Just looking more globally, while, as I mentioned, about 80% of the ocean-going cruise ships now are capable of plugging in, there's only about 3% of the ports in the world that can do that can actually receive the plug and provide the shore power. So in Canada, we currently have, I believe, 3 ports, and I know others are looking at it actively. And it does come down to a business case. Some ports are, if they're not port authorities, they don't have the same borrowing capability in order to invest in that shoreside infrastructure. So that can be one of the limitations of making that available. But certainly when it is available at a competitive price, our members are interested in plugging in.
Peut-être, je voudrais terminer avec une dernière question sur la question des...
I have a final question about the availability of border clearance services. That's been mentioned constantly by witnesses. People from all ports and all organizations say that this is a very common problem. Do you know why there are no more border clearance services that are offered, do you pay for it? If you're paying for the service, I don't see why the government would limit the possibilities of growth in that way.
Process involved. My understanding is when COVID struck, it disrupted a lot of things. And once cruise resumed, after the interruption, it was 2 years in Canada that cruise was halted, the CBSA services were not restored to all of the smaller ports where it previously was available. And this definitely does negatively impact the ability of our member lines to call on those ports. In my remarks, I mentioned let's maybe take a look at expanding the pilot program that was offered for virtual clearance. There might be a way that we can expand on that and provide, an equivalent amount of security for Canada with these cruise passengers coming aboard by using newer technology and newer approaches, so deliver the service, but perhaps at a reduced cost. And if staffing is a limitation, then this would be one way to help improve that. I can speak from personal experience with my family when we called in Victoria. We're all detained on the ship waiting for clearance to take place, for literally officers to come on board, check paperwork, and do various things. Even though my family wasn't being interviewed, we had to wait like everyone else. And that then deprives not just the passengers of an experience, but the community of the benefit of having thousands of passengers going ashore and spending money in the community because they're held back for a period of time. So anything we can do to kind of expedite that process would benefit the cruise experience, but especially benefit the communities, because to be a bit crass, there'd be more time for passengers to spend money in your communities.
Thank you. Merci, Mr. Barcel-Duval. Thank you, Mr. Penner. Next, we'll go to Mr. Albus. Mr. Albus, the floor is yours. 5 minutes, sir.
And welcome to my fellow British Columbian, Mr. Penner. Appreciate you being here. In regards to the cutbacks about particular CBSA allocations, can you give the committee in writing just a sample of those particular ports that have had that, where that's an issue, as well as any other suggestions you would have about shortening up? Because I do like the idea of allowing Canadians, for example, that don't need to be checked by CBSA to be able to do that more expediently. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, you some more information for sure.
Yeah, because that's a big thing. Now, I did want to talk to you a little bit about the issue you said with contractual services. I think you said it was usually around warranty work. We do have excellent infrastructure in British Columbia. I'm sure the other provinces have the same, where we could do more of this work, but it's difficult. Under CETA, that's the Comprehensive Economic Treaty Agreement with Europe, there's supposed to be a contractual service suppliers, a T47 that IRCC is supposed to be able to give. Usually takes about 2 to 8 weeks, and then CBSA reviews that. Does your industry know about this particular T47 process that speeds up so that people can come in and do this kind of contractual work?
I can't say with certainty. I would hope so. Individual cruise lines are responsible for, of course, arranging for the refits, working with their service provider. In the case of British Columbia, it's C-SPAN, and they mostly use the facilities around Esquimalt near Victoria, but also in Vancouver.
So do you think that this committee should recommend to the government that there needs to be more industry consultation about these mechanisms specifically? The T43 is for independent professionals. The T47, as I said, for contractual service suppliers. And there's already mandated criteria for that, because this really disturbs me that we're turning away business because it can't be done in a timely way.
You know, it never hurts to have another look at it, and I'm sure there's always room for improvement. I can't say exactly which cruise lines are using which mechanisms, but it's always worth taking a look to whether there's ways we can make our processes more efficient.
If someone has a contract and is a EU resident, they should be able to actually show up at a port of entry, and I'm sure people in your industry would benefit from that, so I appreciate that. Lastly, modernizing and expanding port infrastructure. You say in your opening statement there's more than a dozen sites that could be improved. Could you supply the committee with those sites just so we can have it for a part of our report?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regard, thank you, Mr. Penner. Just in regards, I'd like to make this. I've already done notice of motion, Mr. Chair, that notwithstanding the scheduling motion adopted by the committee during its 16th meeting, and in light of recent media reports regarding a $206 million taxpayer-funded loan from the Canada Infrastructure Bank to the Mercy River Wind Project, and allegations that the project's electricity selling entity, Roswell Developments, is largely owned by individuals with close or close family or business ties to former Liberal members of Parliament Scott Bryson, Darrell Sampson, and David Dingwall. The committee undertake a study examining the decision-making process, due diligence practices, governance safeguards, and conflict of interest policies of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank as they relate to this loan. A, that the study consists of no fewer than the 2 meetings. B, that the study be given absolute priority over the matters before the committee. C, that the committee invite the Minister of Housing Infrastructure, the CEO, and other officials from the Canada Infrastructure Bank, representatives of Roswell Developments, include Michael Sampson, Edgar Sampson, Mitchell Bryson.
Mr. Ellis, I have a point of order. Excuse me, sir. Just hold that thought, please. I have a point of order from Mr. Lauzon.
I just received a message from the TransLink that they don't have the writing of that, and
yes, it's been given.
Writing too fast, so they can follow in French.
Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to get through in my time, and you know we have supplied this to the chair, or to the.
I do have to, if they can't translate, I'm not allowed to move forward. So
okay, I could slow down, but I just need to know I can finish doing this.
I'm just going to ask a question to our interpreters. If he slows down, will that be helpful? Don't they have a copy? Or
they should have a copy.
What's that?
You send them a copy of it? Phil's just sending him a copy.
Okay, what we'll do is we're going to send a copy to the Mr. Albus, and I'll let you continue, sir. I really just can't proceed unless we have translation.
Yeah, no, fair. Dan Resco, David Howell, Scott Rogers to testify before the committee in relation to the study. That one meeting be dedicated to hearing the testimony of the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure and the CEO and other officials from the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and that E.
Mr. Albus, I am going to have to cut you off. We have zero translation right now.
Okay.
So the clerk is going to, he's working as diligently as possible to ensure that they have a copy of it. And then once they have a copy of it, Mr. Albus, I will turn the floor back over to you to continue. Thanks for your patience, colleagues.
Thank you. Be dedicated to hearing the testimony of representatives of Roswell Developments, including Michael Sampson, Edgar Sampson, Mitchell Bryson, Dan Rusco, David Howell, and Scott Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. Appreciate your patience with that.
Would you like me to say it again?
Faster, please. All jokes aside, I just want to make sure that we're okay? Okay. All right. Questions, comments, colleagues?
Well, I'm happy to speak to the motion.
If you'd like to speak to it, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is a news story that has raised a lot of concerns, and we believe, the Conservatives believe, that by studying this in a timely fashion, bringing forward and asking these questions, we've seen before that the CIB seems to have its own criteria, and I think we need to investigate it. We've seen before in previous decisions that Made in Canada was not part of their regime. But in this case, I do think that the public trust, meaning that the people feel that these public entities, whether they be crown corporations or government agencies, do abide by certain rules around conflict of interest. And we think that in this case, having the various groups come in, including the Minister's Office and the CIB, as well as inviting the company themselves, we can publicly address this, and that this is the proper forum for such a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albus. Question, commentaire, Mr. Barcelou-Duval?
Questions and comments, Mr. Barcelou-Duval? Yes, I think it's the subject that is of public interest. I think we've often seen that this kind of story from the Liberals, but we don't know if this is the case now, but if it's suspicious, I think that we need to interview witnesses and find answers to the questions raised by my colleagues. So I'll wait and see if there are other comments before saying any more, but I agree in principle with this. The only point would be point B. It's mentioned that the study be given absolute priority over other matters before the committee. I think from my side, if we, I don't know if the clerk has invited other witnesses on this. So maybe we could amend B so that we can let the witnesses who have already been invited to witness to come. But otherwise, I agree entirely with this. I have Mr. Lauzon and then Mr. Albus. Yes. Point B doesn't work. My document is not there. It says the service is not available. I'll try and access it in a different way. So I'll come back. Do we have the amendment here? So my computer has just crashed. I would like that B would be that the study be given absolute priority over other matters before the committee. So it would come back to what Mr. Barsalou-Duval just stated. So I'd like B to be changed, but the rest is fine.
Certainly can appreciate Mr. Barsalou-Duval's comments where he would like to see, because the clerk has been working very, very hard, and I will praise the clerk publicly here for trying to keep so many balls in the air. So perhaps if I can make a suggestion to Mr. Barsalou-Duval, witnesses who have been confirmed, who have been confirmed as to the at the point of when this adoption of the motion happens, be kept, and that the priority is given directly after. I'm just worried that if we say invited, some people may not have responded, and that could create some confusion in the clerk's mind. So if there's been a commitment made to have witnesses come at a particular date, that this order would, or this particular motion would not apply to that, and that the clerk would simply slip in as quickly as possible, so that the substance of the motion happens as quickly as possible. Maybe if the member was to make that motion, I would absolutely accept it as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. Avant que je passe la parole à Mr. Barsalou-Duval,
I give Mr. Barsalou-Duval the floor. There was an uncertainty in terms of your position. You said something and both sides said, but what were you saying? So I didn't have the text of point B. What I would like to propose as an amendment, as a sub-amendment, because Mr. Barsalou-Duval already presented an amendment, is that the study, so this is point B, the study starts after the conclusion of the study we are doing about the ports in Canada. We want to, so we could go ahead, but we want to prioritize the study that we're conducting now. Thank you, Mr. Lauzon. Mr. Barsalou-Duval. Well, in fact, Chair, I was going to have a proposal of amendment to what Mr. Alba said, which would be at the end of point B, we would have add accepting meetings for which witnesses have already confirmed their presence. So it would be different in a way from what Mr. Lauzon is proposing. So I don't know how Mr. Lauzon wants to proceed, whether my sub-amendment is acceptable to him as a friendly amendment. So maybe we could go ahead with mine, or if he wants to keep the one that he has presented on the table now. I think the one he's presented at this point brings us very far forward in time. I think the subject matter here is very important, and we're talking only about 2 meetings. And I think it's a subject that must be dealt with soon. We can't leave that to the month of May. So Mr. Lauzon and Mr. Albus. But just to confirm, so if we finish the study on ports, that brings us to April 15th. So we finish on the 13th. Wednesday is the 15th. So we would start on the 15th, just to confirm with everyone. Mr. Luzon, Mr. Chair, took the words from my mouth. So yes, with the calculations we have to conclude the study without knowing the number of witnesses that are available, already next week we're in our riding. So if we have a date, it's not June, it's April 15th, which would end. We could even say that on the agenda for the 15th, that on the we will we would deal with this motion on both days. That would work for me, and it would not delay the work we're conducting now. And we know that it will be over by the 13th, and that we'd be available on the 15th. So that wouldn't bother me to add a date rather than to leave it to the possible number of witnesses we might have and how many are on the list, because I can't speak in the name of the organization, or I can't speak for the clerk. But when we're working with witnesses, it's a work in progress. So we communicate, we talk to them, things come back, then they'll say yes, no, we have to. So I don't want to disturb that process. So if the witness gives his acceptance for next week and we don't welcome him, it's a work that's already in process of receiving witnesses. That being said, knowing that we would have a date, a fixed date, which would be the 13th for the end. So at the latest, on the 15th, we could deal with this file. Thank you, Mr. Duzon, Mr. Albus, and then Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
An automobile together and you were driving, you would find that quickly that I was a bit of a backseat driver. And so we actually have two different visions here. Both talked about emotion, but I do believe Mr. Barcelou-Duval has mentioned it twice. And I think that for the simplification of this committee's thought processes, having debate about two different propositions at the same time is not healthy, because then we don't know who we're speaking to. Perhaps we could just say that on table is the friendly amendment was received, and that is what we are debating. And if the Liberals are unhappy with Mr. Duval's changes, then they should simply oppose that and shoot down the complete motion altogether. So I just would think that it would be helpful for us right now if you were just to say, we're talking about Mr. Albus's motion with a friendly amendment, then we can debate to that, and then we can have a clean vote. We can all go home. And I will stop telling you how to drive.
Well, I appreciate the help, Mr. Albus. After 6 years as a chair, I'm sure I really need it. I will say that I appreciate a healthy debate and healthy discussion, and if there is a way for this committee to come to a conclusion and find solutions that are best interests of Canadians, that's always my approach as chair. So if there is, we threw around a date of August 15th, April 15th, excuse me. August 15th is way too far away. April 15th, is that something that is amenable to colleagues to start this? It's 5 meetings away. Just throwing it out there. If this is something we feel like we should start earlier, that's also something that can be looked at by the members. Le 15 avril, c'est trop tard. Je vous passe la parole,
C'est trop tard, mais j'ai peut-être une autre
April 15th
proposition.
is too late, but I have another compromise proposal that we can discuss. I'll submit this to everyone. So on my Conservative friend side, I know that I brought the amendment saying accepting meetings for which the witnesses have already confirmed their presence, but maybe on their side they could say it another way, that those 2 meetings have to take place before a specific date. And then if we agree that those would happen before a moment that's closer in time, I'm looking for constructive solutions here.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, which is good.
Could we not just look at tacking? Could we not just look at tacking this work on to existing meetings, and then that way the Liberals know that they're still going to get their report study done. We add an extra hour or 2 onto several meetings. We all work a little bit longer. I get that, but then this thing happens quicker, or perhaps you can even start booking on Tuesday or Thursday.
Well, that's what I was just asking the clerk, whether or not it's possible for us to say, instead of having the meeting on April 15th, we set the deadline of having the meetings before a certain date.
Yep.
Obviously, it's with the availability of the witnesses. But if we give them dates and say, can you appear any of these dates, like we've done in the past, if they can't appear on those dates, I can bring it back to the committee and say, here's a date where they can appear, if it's close enough to the deadline that we've given them. We've done that after we had to cancel for Canada Post and Via Rail, and then we found the next available date. Does that work for committee members? Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's the issue right now is that
Tell us what the viability of that would be.
It should clearly define what it is looking to do, and maybe we could discuss that. But at this point, it's not clear exactly what is being asked.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, we're basically saying, throwing out a random date of April 15th being the deadline to host these two meetings. That gives leeway to the witnesses for them to appear. It's two meetings that you're proposing, correct, Mr. Albus? It's the 11th today, so it's a month, even though we're not sitting for 2 weeks of that. So technically, it's only 2 weeks. But I mean, I'm throwing that out there. I don't know if it's even possible. Is this something that you think, based on your experience, that is a? I think we could. Have a day booked with. Monday's the only day I believe that we have booked with witnesses confirmed. This coming Monday. So we lose a day there. We would then, the Monday we get back from the break.
Correct, the 23rd.
The 23rd. That would leave us the 25th. Then we're on break again. So we'd have
for 2 weeks, yeah.
the 25th. Then we're gone for 2 weeks. So it really doesn't leave much time. Are we sitting the week after that?
Let me open up a sitting calendar here.
I think this is the time where we have the most sitting or breaks in the period of 6 weeks.
We are here. Yeah, so 23rd is booked. 25 is an option.
Yes, Mr. Albus.
Yeah, I do think that we need to think a little bit outside the box here and perhaps maybe see if there's an alternative day that we can sit, or as I said, amend the existing dates we have, for example, the 23rd, adding on an extra meeting, so an extra 2 hours there. Conservatives are fine to kind of be flexible. We just think that this needs to come forward sooner than later.
Okay, thoughts, colleagues? Mr. Albus, share us. Yes, Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Ben, je pense qu'on parlait du 15 avril. Là, donc
So I think
on
we
pourrait...
talked about April 15th. We could simply say that those two meetings have to take place before April 15th or at latest on April 15th. So from here until April 15th. So it gives some flexibility. The current study can go forward, and also we'll have time for those two meetings.
And just so you know, just to protect the clerk here, he will do his darndest to get them here. If it's not possible, we will communicate that. He will communicate that. No, I'm saying the clerk will communicate that, and I'm asking publicly to do so. Communicate that we're having an issue, that this perhaps one witness can only appear on another date after the deadline, which can then be discussed by the members.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, I would just strongly encourage when you and the clerk endeavored to bring people in, append to an existing meeting or on a Thursday or a Tuesday until we get this done, even a Friday. Like we
do our darndest, if we always have, as we've been able to do with Via Rail and Canada Post.
But again, this is the thing is that we've had where it took 160 days before the Minister of Public Safety came to answer questions on BC ferries. Okay. That's just not acceptable. So
we'll work diligently to get this done. Do I have agreement from all parties on this?
Yes.
Okay. So agreed. I think that's it, colleagues. I want to thank the witnesses for appearing before us today. Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate your time and contributing to this very important study. With that, colleagues, the meeting is adjourned. However, I want to wish everybody safe travels wherever you're going, whether it's locally or far away, as the roads are quite horrific at the time being. Bonne nuit tout le monde. Thank you very much.
Can I get a ride, Mr. Chair?
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Ellis.